Who's responsible for 1 in 7 of all businesses in this country? Who starts businesses at twice the rate of the rest of the population in the UK? And who creates jobs for 14% of British workers in this country? It's just as well the questions are rhetorical, by the way. Well, it's not Richard Branson. It's not some captain of industry. And it's most definitely not Nigel Farage. The answer, of course, is migrants. Yes, migrants. Recent arrivals to this country who are literally rebuilding Britain through their ascendancy and contribution to the real estate and construction sectors. The research that I draw my figures from focuses on large migrant firms, but it highlights other attributes too. For example, their innovation, their comparative usefulness, and the role of women in these businesses. But what I want to talk about today is not the spectacular successes behind these figures. That's impressive enough. Rather, I want to talk about the baker, the grocer, and the internet cafe that you see in the St. Matthew's area of Leicester, or Highfields, or the Sparkhill area of Birmingham, where I currently work. Because it's my argument that the contribution that they make, those are the kinds of businesses that we research at my centre, the contribution that those businesses make are really significant in terms of their social impact as well as their economic impact. In fact, I think their contribution is so important that it should prompt us to think again about the kind of entrepreneurial activities that we value. So let me start by telling you the story of the Somali grocer whom I interviewed a few years ago as part of a research project on the Somali community. We visited the grocery shop, very unexceptional, nicely stocked, fairly basic. The interview we conducted was on the first floor of the premises, and as I made my way up the stairs, I noticed around a dozen people merrily chatting away in a back room. I learnt a lot in the interview, a lot about how they came over in adverse circumstances, pooled their collective resources, didn't get money from the banks, no change there, and developed their business. When the interview came to an end, I asked, well, just something in the back of my mind has been niggling me. Who are these people at the back, in your back room? They said they're from the local community. What are they doing there? They've got nowhere else to go. This is where they come to find out where the jobs are. This is where they congregate to find out where the best schools are for their kids, or how they can get an appointment with their doctor. And as I found out through other research, that was by no means an isolated experience. And that prompted me to think, how should we evaluate that business? As a run-of-the-mill grocery store, or as a social hub, a resource for building community, for building social capital, for building the networks that the formal state and formal institutions have neglected? If it's the latter, we need to think again. Let me tell you about the Iraqi refugee who we interviewed in the Sparkhill area of Birmingham, because that tells us a different story about a business that is started out of utter desperation that grows into a thriving concern. The chap in question, like so many of his counterparts, was extremely well qualified. In fact, he had a PhD in chemical engineering, and he tried his utmost to get a job in the formal mainstream labour market. But like so many who have followed him, he was locked out of that labour market. So he started his own business. wholesaling. He spotted an opportunity in specialist foods. And his business became a success. Soon grew into a larger concern employing some 20 workers, nearly £1 million turnover. What was really interesting about this business was its sheer entrepreneurial behavior of the owner and the people around him. He used his international links, international connections to source and identify particular foodstuffs and created a new market in the back streets of Birmingham. And that highlights another characteristic of migrants, their entrepreneurialism, but also their capacity to be very agile internationally. And those transnational links mark them out from the rest of the small business population. And those transnational links can be a really important source of competitive advantage. Those are two instances of the contributions that migrant entrepreneurs make. And that's something we should celebrate. But so often when we talk about entrepreneurship, we forget about the people who work in the businesses. And actually, the workers in migrant businesses are worth a mention, because often they are the most discriminated against, the most disadvantaged. But what we discovered in our studies is that they see their presence in those firms as a bit of sanctuary because they are locked out the labour market too. And they use that opportunity to acquire further qualifications so they can have another crack in the labour market, or they use that experience to learn the skills of running their own business. So what you have in those businesses that we often neglect is an entrepreneurial apprenticeship going on. It's a self-sustaining, self-sufficient training system, which we too little appreciate. So, as I draw my comments to a close, I find myself curiously and disturbingly in agreement with Nigel Farage in the sense that migrants are coming in significant numbers, but they're here to build our businesses and create our jobs. They're here to add dynamism and innovation to the entrepreneurial stock. And they're here to reimagine and reinvigorate our cities, our communities, and indeed our country. Thank you very much. That's the warm-up act over with. Can I just introduce you to Jawaahir Daahir?
Thank you very much, Monder. And I would like to add that when I read an article in The Guardian that the new European arrivals actually gave 20 billion boost to UK economy between 2001 and 2011. And I thought it wasn't really a surprise to me. But I think it is very good, I think flap to people like Nigel Farage, who's saying that, Europeans, they're coming to take, our benefit. I'm gonna say you a few brief in terms of the Somali community in Leicester and in terms of the business. And I think, Monder has, touched some, and I worked at Monder, before a couple of times. The Somali community in Leicester, majority of them, they are European nationals. And therefore they could be, figure, they will be part of that because, if you look now, St. Matthews, before the Somali community moved into the city, and now there's huge difference. I don't know whether all of you or some of you know St. Matthews State. And I think I met, a young lady who said that she used to live there, and she can see the differences now between when she used to live there. And there is, more, over 60 Somali businesses thriving in St. Matthews and Highfield Center, and as well as City Center. And there's a lot of Somalis now moving into the wider city as well and establishing their own businesses. It's a very entrepreneurial and people, Somali community. Obviously, there is issues in terms of employment in Leicester, and then people, so they can use their entrepreneurial side to become, self-employed. and in that way, contribute to the society and themselves as well. And this business, could be, for example, restaurants to and money transfer to grocery warehouse and furniture store, internet cafes. And you can, good example is, I don't know if you have seen Matthew's Nomad Cafe, is this, that business owner moved actually from Sweden a couple of years ago. And now if you go to Matthew's, it's one of the favorite, and a cafe that is always packed, and you can see that a variety of background of people, sitting there. But again, when I, set up, Somali Development Service as a social enterprise 11 years ago, it was just me. And I was new as well in Leicester. I moved, 2000 in Leicester from Holland. And so it was about learning, at the same time building, and business that can support the community, local community, who desperately need, support in terms of employment, in terms of education, in terms of and social and housing and families issues. And so my background, I studied language and literature, and when in Somalia, I worked as an assistant professor. And so my background was academic, and in Holland, I was social worker. So here I am, become businesswoman. But at the moment, Somali Development Service, employs over 20 people across the board. We have Asian, African, white, European, all kind of, it reflects really our city, Leicester City. But that's not all. It supports local people. It supports people to integrate. It provides jobs. It helps young people in colleges, in secondary schools to get work experience, to increase their skills. But we also have childcare on board, because in 2004 we did an research on why many Somali, especially lone parents, are not getting into learning and employment. And the key thing was language, and the second was childcare. So we both provide now. We provide language classes on board, as well as childcare. So there is no excuse. But then when you look in Highfield, when you look in London Road, Narborough Road, you can see that the businesses owned by immigrants thriving, flourishing, but creating vibrant and lively atmosphere that people can go and eat and meet and socialize with each other. And so there is also new arrivals. Turkish. I have seen Turkish restaurants now thriving in Highfield as well as in Narborough, and it is great to see that a lot of people who are coming to our city, Leicester, they're here to build themselves, and that not just contributing to the economy, but contributing to our society. The well-being. All kind of the culture, all kind of area that you look to. And so when you look now, as Monder mentioned, some politicians that are using, immigrants, they become hot, spot at the moment. Using as a scapegoat is really, annoying me. And I'm now part of, for example, ITV program, which is doing and the political leaders. And so it's really when you see that people like Nigel Farage using, scapegoat as immigrants, you can see that how narrow-minded they are, because they cannot see the bigger picture. And when I came to Leicester, it opened my eyes, because I knew a lot about Somali community, but now I know a lot about other communities as well. Because it's about working together. It's about, collaborative. It's about partnership. It's about, fitting into the wider, vision of our city, of our society. And I think that is the uniqueness of Leicester. And sometimes, our table, we were discussing about how Leicester, for example, is, and what's maybe missing, because sometimes, the cultural has been also and mentioned, and I was great support of that. But it is about, you cannot success on your own. You need to work with people. You need to for example, see, that vision. And if you are narrow-minded, just, focusing on your own community, you cannot, reach what, you want to reach. So I want to conclude. It's very important that, the government and local authority as well, and acknowledge the immigrants' contribution and support, the positive contribution they are making to our society, not just to their community. Thank you very much for listening.